You are no longer providing the specific version of yourself that they need to remain stable. In their internal world, you have become a threat. This is not because you have become aggressive or cruel. It is simply because your newfound clarity acts as a disruption to the mirror they have been using to regulate their fragile sense of self. When that mirror begins to crack, the reaction is rarely calm. The first shift you might notice is an intensification of the very behaviors that kept you confused in the past. Gaslighting tends to become more aggressive, more frequent, and far more inventive. Suddenly, you find that conversations you remember with perfect clarity are being rewritten right in front of you. Events that you have documented are completely denied. Feelings you once expressed honestly are reframed as overreactions or as imagined wounds that you have invented. This escalation is not a sign that you are wrong or that your memory is failing. Instead, it is a clear sign that your accuracy has become unbearable for them to handle. The more precisely you understand the dynamic between you, the harder they must work to destabilize your own perception. This is because your stable perception is the one thing they cannot control through charm alone. Alongside the gaslighting, you will often see a sudden surge of blame shifting and projection. Behaviors that they have actively engaged in themselves are suddenly attributed to you. In their narrative, you become the manipulator, the cold one, the unstable one, or the person who simply cannot let go of the past. This is not always a form of conscious, calculated deception. In many cases, it reflects a deep psychological defense mechanism where the narcissistic individual simply cannot tolerate the version of themselves you are now witnessing. As a result, they psychologically transplant those uncomfortable traits onto you. It is an unconscious attempt to preserve their own internal self-image by making you carry the heavy weight of what they refuse to acknowledge. Then, the performance of victimhood begins. This is one of the most disorienting stages of the entire process, because the person who has actually hurt you begins to speak as though they are the one being destroyed. They might cry, or they might speak in a soft, wounded tone. They may recount their suffering in exhaustive detail. They might invoke their difficult childhood, their current level of stress, their fragile mental state, or their genuine fear of losing you. While it is true that real pain can exist within individuals who exhibit these patterns, the timing of this performance is what reveals its true function. It almost always appears precisely when you are closing in on accountability, exactly when your clarity is strongest, and exactly when you are closest to finally walking away. The victim narrative is not necessarily a lie within their own mind, but it is a strategy that consistently arrives just when their control is slipping away. If playing the victim does not achieve the result they want, you will often see intimidation rise in its place. This can be overt, such as raised voices, direct threats, or aggressive posturing, or it can be subtle, such as cold stares, long periods of silence, ominous statements, or a sudden withdrawal of warmth that feels meant to be punitive. The silent treatment, in particular, is one of the most psychologically destabilizing tools they have. It activates the natural human fear of abandonment while simultaneously denying you the opportunity to resolve anything at all. It is a form of emotional pressure specifically designed to make you doubt your own decision to see things clearly. And then, almost paradoxically, the warmth suddenly returns. This is the stage that many survivors find the most confusing of all. After the rage, after the silence, and after the cruelty, the narcissistic person may suddenly become the most loving and attentive version of themselves you have ever seen. This is often referred to as hoovering, a term that perfectly captures how this behavior pulls you back into the vacuum of the relationship. The compliments become extravagant. The apologies sound rehearsed yet deeply emotional. The promises of change feel almost convincing. There may be gifts, grand gestures, references to shared memories, or sudden displays of vulnerability that seem to confirm everything you ever hoped for regarding who they could be. This is known as intermittent reinforcement, and it is one of the most powerful conditioning forces in human psychology. Unpredictable rewards delivered after long periods of pain create much stronger emotional bonds than consistent kindness ever could. This is exactly why trauma bonds feel almost chemical or even gravitational, even after you understand exactly what is happening to you. Understanding this is essential because survivors often blame themselves for struggling to leave, even after they have identified the truth. They wonder why their intellectual clarity has not been enough to set them free. They wonder why their heart still aches for someone their mind has finally identified as harmful. The answer is not that you are weak. The answer is that your nervous system has been shaped by months or years of these unpredictable emotional patterns. Your body has learned to associate relief, hope, and connection with the very person who caused you so much distress. Healing requires not only an intellectual understanding, but a slow and patient retraining of the way your body responds to that bond. Meanwhile, outside of your private dynamic, another pattern often begins to unfold. Image management intensifies. The narcissistic person becomes increasingly invested in how they appear to other people, such as mutual friends, family members, co-workers, or even their online audiences. You may notice subtle storytelling that paints them as the reasonable one and you as the difficult one. In more severe cases, this escalates into a smear campaign where carefully chosen narratives are spread to people in your shared world. The purpose is rarely just simple revenge. The deeper purpose is to control the narrative before your version of events can take root. If they can define you first, your clarity becomes much easier for others to dismiss. This is the moment many survivors feel a profound sense of isolation because the people they once trusted may begin treating them differently. It is a painful and disorienting experience, and it is one of the most important times to remember that the truth does not require universal agreement to be valid. Your reality is not less real just because someone else has been told a different story. Your personal healing does not depend on convincing anyone else of the truth. It depends entirely on knowing what you know and continuing to live in alignment with that knowing. If this is resonating with you, and you want to keep building the kind of inner clarity that manipulation cannot easily reach, take a moment to subscribe. This channel is designed for survivors who are ready to move beyond confusion and into a deeper understanding of themselves, their patterns, and the complex psychological dynamics that shape their daily experiences. Every video is an invitation to reclaim a little more of the self that was quietly taken from you, and to help you rebuild it on a foundation that cannot be manipulated again. Now, let us turn inward. Because while the external behavior of the narcissistic person is important to understand, what is happening inside you during this stage is even more important. When you first recognize the manipulation, the feeling is rarely pure relief. More often, it is a strange and unsettling mixture of clarity and grief, awareness and confusion, validation and disorientation. You may feel as though you are waking up inside a dream you cannot quite remember, with fragments of memory suddenly making sense in ways that are almost too painful to hold. This is completely normal. This is your mind reorganizing itself around a truth it was previously not safe enough to see. Clarity in the beginning often feels frightening rather than empowering, because it requires you to grieve not only the relationship, but the version of reality you believed you were living in. You have to grieve the person you thought they were. You have to grieve the future you imagined for yourself. You have to grieve the energy you invested into a dynamic that was never going to offer you what you needed. You are moving through a process of shedding an illusion that was once your entire world. It takes time for the weight of that realization to settle, and it takes even more time to find your footing in a reality that feels much more honest, even if it is currently much more lonely. Be patient with yourself as you navigate these layers of awareness. You are not failing because you still feel the pull of the past. You are simply processing a lifetime of conditioning, and that takes immense courage. Every time you choose your own reality over their manipulation, you are choosing your own survival. You are choosing to see yourself clearly, and that is the first step toward the peace you have been searching for. The grief you feel is proof that you were capable of genuine love, even when it was being used against you. That capacity for love is not a weakness. It is a part of your humanity that you can eventually turn back toward yourself. As you continue to pull away from the influence of their narrative, you will begin to notice that the world starts to look different. The frantic need to explain yourself or to defend your actions will slowly begin to fade. In its place, a quiet confidence will grow. It is not a loud or aggressive confidence. It is a steady internal knowing that does not need to be validated by the person who hurt you. You are building a version of yourself that is no longer dependent on their approval, their blame, or their attention. This is the ultimate reclamation. You are taking back the power to define who you are, what you experienced, and where you are going next. It is a slow, quiet work, and it is the most important work you will ever do. Remember that the disorientation you are feeling right now is just a sign that your old reality is dissolving. It is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. As you step away from the fog, things will become sharper. You will begin to trust your own instincts again. You will start to see the difference between genuine connection and tactical manipulation. You are learning to listen to your own internal compass, which is a muscle that likely atrophied during the time you spent focusing on their needs. Exercising that muscle will get easier with every choice you make for your own well-being. Do not let the smear campaigns or the attempts at intimidation keep you in the dark. Their actions are a reflection of their own desperate need for control, not a reflection of your worth. You do not need to fight them for the truth. You only need to remain anchored in it yourself. The people who are meant to stay in your life will see you for who you are, regardless of the stories they are told. And if those who have been manipulated choose to turn away, let them. You are building a new life on a solid foundation of reality, and that foundation is where you will finally find the stability you have been craving. The path ahead may feel uncertain at times, but you are not walking it blindly anymore. You are walking it with the light of awareness as your guide. Keep moving forward, one step at a time, toward the person you were before the world tried to make you someone else. You have all the strength you need to see this through, and you have the right to claim the life that belongs to you. Every time you honor your own experience, you are healing a piece of yourself that was once lost. You are doing the hard work, and it will lead you to a place where you can finally breathe freely again. You also grieve the parts of yourself that you suppressed or distorted in order to keep the relationship functioning. And underneath all of that, you may grieve the version of yourself that existed before this experience began to reshape who you are. This grief is not a sign that you are weak or that you are confused. It is a clear sign that you are processing something very real. Alongside the grief, you might notice a surge of self-doubt that feels almost contradictory. You finally see the truth, and yet you question yourself more than you ever have before. This happens because prolonged exposure to gaslighting teaches your nervous system to distrust its own signals. Even when your conscious mind has finally connected the dots, your body may still flinch at the very idea of trusting your own perceptions. Healing from this is not about forcing yourself to feel certain. It is about gently and repeatedly choosing to believe yourself in small moments until self-trust becomes a stable inner pattern rather than an occasional act of courage. This is also why documenting your reality becomes such a quietly powerful practice. Writing down events as they happen, keeping records of specific conversations, and noting your feelings in real time creates an external memory that cannot be rewritten by someone else. It is not about trying to build a case against them. It is about anchoring yourself in your own lived experience, so that when manipulation attempts to distort your memory, you have something steady to return to. This practice is one of the most underrated tools in the recovery from narcissistic abuse because it slowly rebuilds the essential relationship between you and your own perception. As you continue to heal, you will begin to notice the difference between genuine accountability and manipulative performance. This distinction is one of the most liberating insights you can possibly develop. Genuine accountability is consistent. It does not appear only when your access to them is threatened. It does not center the feelings of the person who caused the harm. It does not require you to immediately forgive or forget. It shows up in changed behavior over a long period of time, in patience with your healing process, in the absence of pressure, and in the willingness to sit with discomfort without demanding a quick resolution. Manipulative performance, by contrast, is almost always urgent. It needs you to respond immediately. It needs you to soften your stance. It needs you to reopen the door. It uses vulnerability as a strategic tool rather than as an honest expression of self. Once you learn to feel the difference, the performance loses much of its power because you stop confusing emotional intensity with emotional truth. You will also begin to recognize the cycles of temporary change that often follow the exposure of the truth. The narcissistic person may genuinely behave differently for days, weeks, or even months. They may attend therapy, read self-help books, speak the language of healing, and appear to be completely transformed. And then, slowly, the old patterns return. They are often more subtle than before, more sophisticated, and more difficult to name. This is not always a deliberate, conscious deception. In some cases, the change is real, but it is shallow and sustained only as long as it is required to regain access to you. True transformation is rare and slow, and it rarely announces itself. It does not ask for credit or applause. It simply unfolds over years, quietly and without a need for performance. While all of this is happening, it is essential to protect your nervous system. Emotional regulation is not a luxury during this stage. It is a necessary survival skill. Practices such as slow breathing, grounding yourself through your senses, engaging in gentle movement, spending time in nature, getting restful sleep, and limiting your exposure to overstimulation all help your body remember what true safety feels like. You do not need to push yourself to heal quickly. You simply need to provide your system with the conditions in which healing can naturally occur. The body recovers in its own rhythms, not by following a deadline. Boundaries become another quiet pillar of your recovery. A boundary is not a wall, and it is not a punishment for the other person. It is a clear statement of what you will and will not participate in, and it is held without the need for the other person to agree with it. With narcissistic individuals, boundaries are often tested repeatedly. Sometimes this is done through charm, sometimes through anger, and sometimes through guilt. The strength of a boundary is not measured by how the other person responds to it, but by how consistently you honor it within yourself. Over time, this consistency rebuilds the inner authority that manipulation tried so hard to erode. It is also important to avoid unnecessary confrontation during this stage. Many survivors feel a strong urge to explain themselves, to prove their perceptions, and to make the narcissistic person finally understand the truth. This impulse is deeply human and is rooted in the hope that recognition will finally bring you closure. But closure in this context rarely comes from the other person. It comes from within. Engaging in repeated confrontations often only provides new material for manipulation, new opportunities for distortion, and new openings for emotional escalation. Sometimes the most powerful response is a quiet one. Sometimes the most liberating choice is to stop trying to be understood by someone whose understanding has never been a safe place for you. Rebuilding your identity is perhaps the most tender part of this entire journey. After prolonged manipulation, many survivors realize they no longer fully recognize themselves. Your preferences, your opinions, your dreams, and even your small daily habits may have been shaped to accommodate someone else's moods. Reclaiming your identity is a slow, curious process of asking yourself small questions. What do you actually enjoy? What do you actually believe to be true? What kind of rest do you really need? What kind of people make you feel more like yourself? These questions, when asked gently and often, begin to restore the inner landscape that was quietly rearranged without your full consent. Self-validation becomes the foundation of this restoration. For a long time, you may have needed external confirmation to feel certain about your own experiences. Healing involves learning how to offer that confirmation to yourself. When a memory surfaces, you can acknowledge it. When a feeling arises, you can honor it. When your intuition speaks, you can listen without requiring any external proof. This does not mean you become closed to feedback. It just means you stop outsourcing your reality to people who have clearly shown they will distort it. Support systems matter enormously during this time. But the quality of your support matters more than the quantity. A small number of people who can listen without judgment, who can hold space without trying to fix you, and who can believe you without needing every single detail, are worth far more than a large circle of well-meaning but confused observers. Professional support from trauma-informed therapists, when you can access it, can be especially valuable because the patterns of narcissistic abuse are specific and benefit from specialized understanding. As your clarity strengthens, you will begin to notice red flags earlier in future interactions, not with a sense of paranoia, but with quiet discernment. You will sense when someone's words do not match their actions. You will notice when affection feels conditional. You will recognize when curiosity about you is actually just information gathering. You will feel the difference between people who respect your boundaries and people who test them. This is not hypervigilance. This is wisdom slowly integrated into your body, becoming a natural part of how you move through the world. If you have made it this far and you feel something inside you beginning to settle, beginning to clarify, and beginning to remember itself, I want to invite you once more to subscribe and stay close to this work. Healing from narcissistic abuse is not a single revelation. It is a long, layered, and deeply personal process. And having steady, thoughtful guidance along the way can make a truly meaningful difference. This channel exists for exactly that reason, to walk beside you through the stages of your recovery, to offer language for experiences that have long felt unspeakable, and to remind you that emotional freedom is not only possible, but is already beginning even now in the quiet way you are choosing to understand yourself more deeply. Remember that knowledge is not the end of healing, but it is the beginning of your freedom. The moment you understood the manipulation was the moment its grip began to loosen. Even if your heart has not yet caught up with your mind, the narcissistic person may continue to react, to escalate, to soften, to perform, to disappear and return, to rewrite the past, and to reshape the present. But none of that defines your recovery. Your recovery is defined by the slow, steady return to yourself, by the moments when you choose your own perception over their narrative, and by the quiet decisions to rest, to grieve, to grow, and to live in alignment with the truth you have finally allowed yourself to see. And as you continue along this path, you will discover that the most profound transformation is not in them and never was. It is in you, in the way you are learning to inhabit your own life again with a depth of self-trust that no manipulation can ever fully reach. And that depth will keep expanding quietly and powerfully long after this chapter finally comes to an end.